Once upon a time, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where the nights seemed too calm to ever hold secrets, lived Clara Jennings. Clara was 32, a woman who often hid her loneliness behind polite smiles. She worked as a librarian, loved old books, and carried the kind of grief that didn't shout but whispered inside her heart. Her marriage had ended 2 years ago, and though people said she looked stronger now, Clara knew she was still piecing herself back together, too. The story begins on a windy evening when Clara returned home from work. The house creaked with every step as if it were listening. She set her bag down, poured herself tea, and tried to distract her mind with a novel. Yet, her attention kept breaking. Something felt off. The air was thicker than usual, as though the silence itself was waiting for her to notice something. Clara had lived in that house for 6 years, long enough to know its usual quirks. But tonight, when she passed the hallway mirror, she swore she caught a flicker of movement behind her. She turned sharply. Nothing, only her own pale reflection staring back. Her lips trembled, though she told herself it was just her imagination. Still, she could not ignore the way her stomach tightened. That night, Clara struggled to sleep. Every creak of the floor, every groan of the wind outside, felt louder than it should. Around midnight, the sound of her phone ringing jolted her awake. Heart pounding, she reached for it on the nightstand. The screen lit up with unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." Her voice was soft, shaky. There was no response, just silence. Then a faint sound, almost like breathing. Clara's throat tightened as she whispered, "Who's there?" But the line went dead. She sat frozen in the dark, clutching the phone as though it were her last lifeline. The next morning, Clara told herself it had to be a prank. She went about her routine, convincing herself she was overreacting. But when she opened her front door to leave for work, her breath caught. On the doormat lay a folded piece of paper. No envelope, no signature, just a note. It read in shaky handwriting, "You are not alone." Her knees nearly buckled. For a long moment, she stood there gripping the paper, fighting the instinct to run. She looked up and down the street, but the neighborhood was still no one in sight. With trembling hands, she stuffed the note in her bag, locked the door, and hurried to her car. As Clara drove away, her mind spun with questions. Who left the note? Why now? And more importantly, what did they want from her? Viewers, imagine waking up to find that chilling message at your doorstep. Would you ignore it? Or would you search for the truth, no matter how dangerous? Hold on, because Clara's story has only begun. That evening, when Clara returned, she inspected every corner of the house. She checked the locks twice, pulled the curtains shut, and even left the hallway light on. But as the hours passed, her unease grew. Around 9, she heard the faint sound of footsteps upstairs. Her blood ran cold. She lived alone. Grabbing a flashlight, Clara forced herself to move. Each step up the staircase was heavy, her breath shallow. "It's just the house," she whispered, though her voice cracked. She reached the landing, aimed the light into the first room empty. Then the second empty again. Finally, she turned toward her bedroom. The door was wide open. Clara froze, staring into the darkness beyond. Slowly, she stepped closer, her fingers trembling against the flashlight. She shined the beam across the room. Nothing moved, but then her eyes fell on the bed. There, resting neatly on the pillow, was another note. This one read, "I've been watching you." Clara dropped the flashlight. Her scream caught in her throat, swallowed by the heavy silence of the house. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. She was no longer sure if she was trapped in her own imagination, or if someone truly had found a way inside her life. And as the night pressed down on her, Clara realized she could no longer pretend her world was safe. Once upon a time, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where the nights seemed too calm to ever hold secrets, lived Clara Jennings. Clara was 32, a woman who often hid her loneliness behind polite smiles and casual hellos to her neighbors. Her days were filled with the soft routine of tending to her garden and baking bread, the flour dusting her apron as she hummed old folk songs. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the quiet of her home would envelop her. A silence so profound it echoed the emptiness in her heart. One night, As Clara was washing dishes, the silence was broken. Not by the clatter of silverware or the hum of the refrigerator, but by a sound that sent shivers down her spine, a phone ringing. Startled, she dropped the sponge. The phone was on the other end of the kitchen, her landline, which she hadn't touched in months. As she picked up the receiver, the caller ID displayed an unknown number. With a mix of apprehension and curiosity, she answered, "Hello." The line was silent except for what sounded like soft breathing. Then she heard a knock that seemed to come from the receiver itself. Terrified, Clara hung up. Was it a prank, a telemarketer, or something more sinister? The thought sent a chill through her. 4 in the morning. The mystery deepened. Clara found a piece of paper on her doorstep. It was a flimsy, torn piece from a notebook, and scrunched up so tightly that the water from her morning watering can was unable to unfurl it. When she finally got it open, the neat handwriting inside sent a fresh wave of fear through her. "You are not alone. Who wrote this? Why did they leave it on her doorstep?" These questions echoed in her head long after the sun had risen. As the day wore on, the unease didn't lift. In fact, it intensified. She could have sworn she heard footsteps upstairs, dragging footsteps, even though she lived alone. That night, as Clara lay in bed trying to sleep, she felt a presence in the room with her. She turned to her pillow and saw another note. "I've been watching you." The paper was soft against her cheek, yet the words burned like hot coals. Fear tightened its grip around her heart, squeezing the breath from her lungs. What was happening to her? Who was watching her? And why? The questions swirled in her head, refusing to let her rest. Please like, share, and comment below.